Hello, everyone. My name is Naisha. I am the program manager here with the Hope and Space Foundation. And today we have an exciting, very exciting event. For the first time ever, we have a three-person panel discussion, and we are focusing on the LGBT family structures. And I'm excited because this is a new topic for me. I'm sure the panelists have some great recaps and tips for us. And I'll get started with our first introduction. I have Kenya Jones. She is a licensed clinical social worker in Georgia, and she holds a bachelor's and master's of social work degree. And she plans to pursue a doctor of social work degree in the beginning of spring 2025 from the University of Kentucky. I'm sending you much love, Kenya. And as a seasoned social worker with over 13 years of experience in the field, her work spans across various settings such as healthcare, community mental health, and private practice. In her personal time, she loves live music, cooking, traveling, and spending time with her wife, daughter, and friends. All right, and I'm going to move on over to Hakeem. Hakeem is a counselor, social worker, speaker, educator, and spiritualist. For over 12 years, Hakeem has been an advocate for mental health and emotional wellness. His efforts have evolved to include a social justice lens as well as a spiritual perspective. Hakeem is a founder of Beyond Living. He received his Master of Social Work degree from the University of Albany. He leverages his experience as a licensed social worker and a Black man to teach classes and facilitate workshops for folks to lead authenticity and an open mind and an open heart. Hakeem, thank you so much for everything that you do. And I'm going to end our bio section with Dr. Isaiah Seifa, is a licensed clinical psychologist with a doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a BA, a bachelor's in psychology from Wesleyan University. Dr. Seifa was born and raised in Jamaica, Queens, whoop whoop, so was I, by three generations of phenomenal women. And as a Black queer first generation college student, he has a keen understanding for how various forms of power and privilege inform our everyday lives and psychological well-being. Additionally, he has his own lived experience of therapy and healing, and thus has a deep appreciation for how big and undertaking the process of change can be. All right, everyone, thank you for your patience as I read through three bios. So we're going to jump right in as I just spotlight our panelists. Give me 1 second. Okay, here. And I'll add myself. All right, sweet. So the chat box is open as we're talking. If you have any questions, you can place them in the chat, but we'll definitely have time, at least about 15 minutes toward the end, to ask some questions as well. So I will get started. And the first question I'm going to ask is, we're going to answer them as a panel. Three people, we're all going to answer them because I'm very curious and confident that we have different answers. So what are the different types of family structures that exist within the LGBTQ community? Because a lot of people think they know, but they may not know. And Hakeem, I'll start with you.
So, thank you for having me, Naisha. This is a great opportunity. Um, the different family structures, I'm under from the understanding chosen family. You have your biological family. You have different I don't want to say tiers, but different modes or formations of your biological family that where you're adopted or in foster care or um, uh, literally with your biological parents. But I love for our community the chosen family because not often you have your biological family where it's so tight knit and accepting, and so you have your family members that you literally choose or they've chosen you. And here in Atlanta, I'm seeing how expansive that is because it wasn't really, I'm from upstate New York, and so it wasn't really a thing. It is a thing, but not really to the degree that I see and witness it in Atlanta. And I appreciate it. And I've been adopted into a family. So it's really interesting to see how it unfolds and how it plays out, but also how it's very nurturing.
Thank you for that. And Kenya, how about for you?
Well, for me, I think definitely some of the family dynamics look different within the community. So, just from my practice and my personal experience, I'm in a same-sex family. So, I have a wife, I have a daughter. So, that would be, two female partners and a child. It could also look like two male partners and a child, or I have a client that has he's going through a surrogacy process, so he's going to be a father and have a baby. He wants a baby, So I think it can look different. Like Hakeem said, your chosen family, and then you can have your work family, and then we also can get into the polyamorous lifestyle because that's a whole nother extended family. So I think it can look really different across the community.
Thank you. And Dr. Isaiah, we end this question with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I definitely echo like what's already been said about chosen family. I think this idea of polyamory or monogamy is also, it's not necessarily unique to the LGBT community, but in my personal practice and also in my life, I found that members of that community are more likely to be in some sort of non-monogamous relationship situation. And I think another thing that many of us encounter is kind of mentorship relationship as well. I think a lot of us don't grow up with role models for what queer adulthood looks like. So an important part of development for some of us may be connecting with people who are a little bit older and really learning from them and being taken under their wing. Sometimes it has a romantic aspect to it. It doesn't necessarily have to, but that's definitely an aspect that I think sets folks in the community apart, is that that element of like mentorship and needing models outside of the nuclear family for what a life can be and what adulthood can look like.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love how you all mentioned, it's all about us growing up and choosing a specific family if needed. And some of us know here, I'm a mom, I'm married to my wife. My wife gave birth to our daughter, and I adopted our daughter. So people like question, like, well, who's the mom? And I come straight and correct. We're both her mom, and they're confused. And if they need me to break it down, I can break it down further. And I'm proud to say my daughter understands that 100%. She also understands that some people have dads, some people don't, some people have moms. We have to break it down because every family is different. So that is, I'll just add, I wanted to add that take in. So, people understand that every family structure is different for sure. All right, so I'll go on to this next question. That Dr. Isaiah, I'd love to start with you. What are some of the common legal challenges that LGBT families face and how they can navigate these issues better? Or can they?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that I did a little bit of investigating on because I was like, it's not something that I necessarily always have front of mind. Um, and one thing that I think is important to highlight is that oftentimes when we think about LGBT families, we often have this idea of these affluent, white, cisgender, usually men in an urban area who are going through a formal legal planned adoption process. And what the research shows is that actually that's not the case, right? Like, so people in LGBT families are more likely to live in poverty, about twice as likely to live in poverty. They're more likely to be members of racial ethnic minorities. What we don't think about, like when we're thinking about family, are the people who step in to take over caregiving responsibilities because maybe that brother or that cousin or that family member isn't able to adequately provide caregiving. So it's not necessarily always chosen. It can be something that can be thrust upon people, and maybe more common in families where there is like dysfunction or there is a need for someone to step in. So in terms of the legal issues, these happen at every level. So there are states where they are still denying the right to adopt, or to be placed in foster care, to have a foster care placement for LGBT families. Um, LGBT families, there's also a higher tax burden, like within our tax policy, there's a very narrow definition of what family is. And so that means that people living in non-heterosexual families, they may not have the same like childcare credits, for example, especially if it's outside of the context of a legal marriage. They may also find that children are denied protections when a parent dies or is disabled, if there hasn't been a formal adoption process, health insurance. Um, Again, qualifying for government assistance for families often means meeting this definition of what a family is. And if that definition is narrow, then we're talking about people who may already be vulnerable, who don't have access to certain kinds of government assistance. So lots of barriers, you know, that we may face as we're trying to build families. Um, you know, I think to answer the second part of the question, on the one hand, there's a policy issue, right? So things like comprehensive parental recognition laws for you know, for both federal and state programs, revisions to the tax code, economic protections put in place. But I think at the individual level, community is really important, right? Of course, you know, we can talk about the challenges that these families face, but there are also strengths and there's also resilience. And, you know, there's a long history of people not just surviving, but thriving. And I think that um, having, you know, spaces to build community is so important. And this can be accomplished through like online resources, forums, you know, LGBT centers, finding lawyers or social workers who have specialty working with LGBT families. And I think also, as far as the community aspect goes, a willingness to kind of color outside of the lines, right? Like that's what we've been doing, right? And it may take thinking beyond like the nuclear family and thinking, you know, creatively in terms of resources, in terms of how do we leverage adoption, like, you know, how do we leverage different kinds of like legal measures in order to put in some of those protections.
Thank you for the breakdown. And hopefully that helps someone. If you have any questions about that, we can hopefully address that here or point you to the resources that you need. Because I have some in my back in my, you know, in the back of my mind, but I know that our guests have some as well. And Kenya, if it's okay, I'd love to ask you the same question. So, what are some common legal challenges LGBT families face? You know, as being a mom and a wife, have you had to endure anything, step up, you know, higher than you have in the past?
Well, for me personally, no. But when I thought about this question, I instantly kind of thought about like gender affirming care, you know, like trans rights, things like that. And so I don't work in the legal realm, but I'm just thinking about, you know, recently when, you know, the government was trying to, you know, put certain bans on trans rights and gender affirming care and, you know, how we want to identify and just having competent and health equity, things like that. So that's kind of what comes to mind when I think about legal challenges that even some of my clients are facing when they want to have, you know, start gender affirming care and surgery and, you know, how they want to identify and they want to have, you know, the hormone replacement therapy and top surgery and, you know, different things like that. And so as a social worker, we did learn about, you know, policy and lobbying and how to try to affect change through advocacy and community engagement and lobbying, trying to get to the stakeholders and the policymakers to try to affect change in that way. So that's not work that I do, but those are some of the common things that I see and that, you know, I'm all about healthcare and gender affirming care. So that's kind of my stance on that.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. And Hakeem, do you want to add anything else to this topic or to this question?
Yeah, I would just echo exactly what Dr. Cypher and Kenya had mentioned. In my scope, I'm not in legal, but it was interesting looking at the question because the folks that I work with are generally early 20s, mid 20s into early 30s. And so we're just really starting talking about family planning. And so that education and that advocacy is important because, like Dr. Cipher said, state by state, right? What can we do? What can't we do? Right. And so managing those expectations is really what we do in the sessions of just even thinking. Because a lot of times this isn't a thought, right? This wasn't possible for folks. And so to really think about it, and even on your own level, but we also have to include the legal level, the macro level. So that's all I would add.
Thank you both for emphasizing when it comes to state by state. I was putting in the chat, I could say really quick, I didn't realize how liberal and free and open New York City was until I came to Georgia, just being very honest. I'm a born and raised New Yorker. I didn't realize it's like, what, you want to marry a woman? Go marry a woman. You want to do this to your body? Go do it. Coming to Georgia, it's a different situation here. And Hakeem is from New York, and Dr. Cipher, your family is from New York. So I'm sure you have an understanding. Okay, sweet. So I definitely want to make sure we leave the floor open. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat. If you want to share personal experiences that you feel comfortable with, please, the chat is open. So my next question is, how can LGBT individuals effectively communicate their needs and experiences to their family members? And I'm thinking this question, revolves around simply coming out or asking for support, or if they'd like to transition, things like that. That's what comes to mind. And Kenny, I can definitely start with you.
Okay. Well, I think it really just kind of starts with identifying like that person in the family that's like you trust, right? So like who's that safe person for you? That might not be your mom. Honestly, it might not be dad. It may be an aunt. It may be a cousin. It may be a friend, a sister that just anybody that you feel close to that you can share that information with. And so I would say, sitting them down, being open and honest about, how you identify, the feelings that you have, talking about, okay, what attracts you to the same sex, or, just being open and honest. And then I would say for the person that, is on that side where you are providing that support, just leading with like love. I think as I'm working with clients in my practice, and pretty much 100% are in the community. What I'm seeing is a lot of, you know, religious trauma and, judgment. And so that's why I wore this shirt today. It says love, because I think that that is just so important. When someone comes to you so vulnerable and so like open, I mean, you got to know that it took so much to even come out and say this. And oftentimes they feel crushed when, religion is weaponized, or they feel, especially when they're made to feel like they're unlovable, or God can't love them because they identify in that way. So I just think that just having that trusting support person in your family that you can lean on is so important, because if not, then you run into issues like low self-esteem. And even in our community, even like teenagers, just looking at research and statistics, like we have a high rate of, depression and suicide, and suicidal ideation within like the teenage LGBTQ population. So it's just so important to have like a safe space to talk about those kind of things.
Yeah, thank you for breaking that down and making it clear, because usually it is that one individual. Now, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you, what if someone doesn't have that individual? Because we know that it's big. And that's when, thankfully, some community organizations are available. But what would you suggest to someone if they come to you and say, Kenya, I just don't have that person in my life right now? How would you help them?
Well, for one, I am that person. So that's, what I do. When people come to me, they come to me because I'm Black, I'm queer. They're looking for someone that they can identify with. They're looking for someone that they can just be authentic, right? But if they don't have, like, I don't have a mother, I don't have anybody that I can connect with, then it might be, a mentor. It might be a teacher, it just a friend, somebody, but for me personally, as a therapist that is primarily working with the population, I am oftentimes that person that they lean on and can just talk to and be themselves with. And I am like a lot of people's only support. And I'm proud to be that.
I love to hear that, and I'm proud because people need it. I'm so happy that people have you. Seriously. All right, so I will move on to my next question. Hakeem, I'll start with you. What strategies can be employed to support LGBT youth within family settings? And I definitely want to highlight that Terry shared that they're in Atlanta and that their elementary school student they changed their pronouns to they, them. And I'm so happy that the school acknowledged that and there was no issues. So that leads me to the question, what strategies can be employed to support the youth within the LGBT community?
Yeah, I think giving space is truly, truly important, non-judgmental, right? So just having a space where you can, one, identify what you need and then be able to ask for it. I think that type of support is key. And just even if the challenge you mentioned something, Aisha, like what if you don't have that support? I think first it starts with you being honest and vulnerable with yourself and not minimizing it, because I think so often we try to bypass a lot. And so just giving space for identifying what you need and the changes that you want to make and all the things. And then, okay, so now how do I ask for it? Where do I go? Sometimes it is your therapist. Sometimes it's identifying someone in the family, or as Dr. Glover mentioned in the comments, having someone that you know that has gone through this experience with you or in their own experience, asking them questions, right? But I think first is identifying it, right? Asking yourself, what do I need? And then going to, okay, what's the support look like? In my sessions, in the early beginning stages, I asked the question, who in your life did you go to when you were having a bad day? Right? Identifying that. What did that feel like? Who was that person? What were their qualities? What were their values? And then asking the question, who made you feel loved? Right? So there, you could either say no one, right? Or you can identify people, one person, usually it's your grandmother. Shout out to grandmothers. But in that, we're looking for those qualities, those characteristics that helped you feel safe. Now, if we can identify what made you feel safe, okay, now are there people in your life that have those same characteristics or qualities? Because then we might take the risk and practice being vulnerable with them, because we may get the same result.
Thank you. And shout out to the grandmothers, as my grandmother definitely was there for sure. And Dr. Isaiah, I'd love to ask you the same question. I put it in the chat here.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the important factors is curiosity, respectful curiosity, because sometimes people can be very disrespectfully curious, right? And we want to differentiate. But I think sometimes youth or people in general have this experience where there's this thing that you haven't shared, there's this part of you that you haven't shared, and you finally work up to sharing it, and people are just like, okay, that's it. And there's never a conversation about it, right? And I think sometimes, family members can think that that is their way of being supportive, right? Like, I'm not going to make this a thing or like ask too many questions. I'm just gonna take it at face value and affirm them. And while I think that that can be helpful at times too, as we've been talking about, like having this identity does kind of come with, where it can come with its own unique set of circumstances, right? And I think that, it's okay for family members to inquire about those. And another part of that, though, I think is this self-education process, right, about sexuality and about gender. Questions like, oh, which one's the man, which one's the woman, right? We know that uh, if we can do some of that work prior to that, right, and come to not see things through a heteronormative lens, then that will definitely inform like how we can approach the individual. So I think there's how we prepare ourselves to show up, and I think another part of that preparation for family members is to really manage your own reaction, right, to what they're sharing. Like it's very, it makes sense. You know, parents, family members often have this idea of who their child is going to be and what their life is going to be like. And at times, someone coming out, it can be shattering, right, in that way. And I think that that's something that should not be placed on the child, right? Because the child, they're just trying to figure out who they are. Um, and I think that really, you know, on the individual level, being able to separate, like, this is how I am responding to this or reacting to this versus like, this is how I can be present for my, you know, for my child. Because it's normal to have a certain reaction to it. But I think, you know, when we place that and make it the responsibility of the child, then I think it can often do a lot of harm.
Thank you so much for that. And just to, again, like the way that we're all breaking it down just brings more clarity that it starts within the home. Also, but before that, I'm sorry, Hakeem said it starts with ourselves. And just agreed and understood so much more, even, you know, with people coming out at a young age. I came out when I was 15. So thankful I had the support of my mom. So thankful. But I also was reading the chat. Terry has an 18-year-old. Her daughter needs a therapist because she knows that there's some things that she can't share with her mom. So if any of our panelists is accepting new clients in the state of Georgia, please put that in the chat. But I will be sure when I send out the recording to send everyone's information. And then Terry, you can reach out to them as well. All right. All right. So I'm excited about my next question. How can LGBT families build and maintain strong support networks? So it takes a village. We know this 100%. So where do we start? You know, if someone is a supportive person, how do they get support from another person? And Hakeem, I'd love to start with you.
The first word that comes to my mind is community. Finding community, right? I think that's a part of Black folks' just resilience. Like it's in our DNA to connect, right? And connect with resources and connect in different capacities to build community. And so what does community look like for you, right? That might be literally going outside and making friends and socializing and building your supports that way. It might be connecting to an already established organization where that's possible, right? But I think building and maintaining strong supports is just who we are. Now, I think it's leaning into that, accepting that, just, you know, and I think there's a lot of fear around, I'm an introvert, right? Right. I'm an introvert and I'm nervous, or I don't like talking, but I think putting yourself out there is one way, is the first step. And then really trusting that community is going to find you. I tell my folks, the people you are seeking, they're also seeking you. But we have to get out. We have to be our most authentic self. We have to be able to express and really identify that this is what I need, this is what I want. And before you know it, you'll find community. Now, maintaining that's a separate conversation, right? Because that requires levels of vulnerability, requires levels of authenticity and maintenance. That's the checking in part. That's the, you know, the conversations. That's the, hey, let's go grab dinner, or, you know, things like that. But I think trusting that if you're looking for community, community is also looking for you.
Let's put that on a t-shirt, okay? If you're looking for community, community is looking for you. Thank you for sharing that. And Kenya, what are your thoughts on this? You know, how can LGBT families build and maintain strong support networks?
I echo that too, like just finding the community. We often think, okay, I'm looking for my tribe. And a majority of my clients are like, I don't have any friends, you know, and I'm like, well, have you been outside? You know, you need to be, you know, connecting. Are you going in the places where your people would be? Like, okay, what are your interests? What are your hobbies? You know, what kind of things would your person be into? You know, how are you going to find them? They're going to come to you. And then just being open and honest. And we always talk about, okay, it's hard to find friends as an adult. And so that's like a common thing that's coming. It's like, yeah, it is. It's kind of difficult because like when we were younger and in school, you just had friends like automatic, right? Because you didn't, they were just in class with you and you just didn't have to work for it. Now we actually have to participate, right? So we have to go, we're in Atlanta, so, in the neighborhood or whatever, Midtown, go to where your people are going to be, or even in mixed crowds. I would say just go, build relationships, think outside the box. Is that like a candle making class? Are you into art? Is it bold? Just the high museum of art. I'm always throwing out different ideas, the Friday night jazz night, all these things. Like, get out there and connect. And then after that, like Hakeem said, the follow up. I was just talking to somebody like, you gotta follow through. Like, friendships are just as in depth as relationships. Don't be like a hoarder of contact and yeah, I can get your Instagram and you never follow up. And it's like, well, what happened? Why don't I still have friends? And okay, but did you follow up? Did you respond to the message? Did you schedule the meetup? Okay. Are we on the surface level? Did you really show up as your authentic self? Are you open? Do you have some, relational trauma? Do you trust people? What is your view of people? Have you been hurt before? Are you really truly open and ready to like be vulnerable and like have the hard conversations and share yourself with someone, not just on a romantic level, but like, and I'm going through that too. I'm like, I'm 35 and I'm like, I'm ready for my bestie, and I'm like, and I'm having to check myself and say, okay, are you checking in? Are you following through? Are you giving your all too? So I'm in it too, and I love meeting new people, and we just have to be open. And like Dr. Cypher said, curious too, not just the family, that we need the support from, but we have to be like, okay, where are my people? Where can I find them? Where would they be? What kind of things would they be interested in? And let me put myself in those environments to meet those people.
So to sum it up, be outside. Get outside, be outside.
It's summer, it's hot. Let's do it.
Let's follow up. Okay, thank you for that. And I'm resonating with everything, for real. My heart is so full just because I wish I saw this when I was 15. Thankfully things were good, but just an extra person to talk to. So a couple of people asked if this recording will be sent out. Yes, and I'm happy that you could share those resources with your loved ones. That was the goal. All right, so my next question, what impact, and this is a big one, what impact do cultural and religious beliefs have on LGBT family dynamics, and how can families navigate these impacts? And we know this is very important. We're Black people. Some of us are Christian. Some of us, just have a specific way growing up. How can this, what is the biggest impact? And go ahead, Dr. Isaiah, please go ahead, start off.
Sure. Well, if we're speaking broadly, of course, the impact is going to differ depending on like what culture we're talking about. So when I saw this question, I was thinking about culture in very broad terms, and religious beliefs in broad terms. And I think that the thread of the approach is first naming them and acknowledging that they're beliefs and not facts or laws, right? I think that we can get into dangerous territory when we treat cultural values and religious beliefs as being static, universal, and implicit, right? Where it's just like, this is just the way things are, like, this is how things have always been. And that's that on that, right? And I think that in order to really examine the impacts and navigate the impacts, like we have to label them, right? We have to see them as ways in which we've been conditioned or socialized, and not necessarily as a universal. So, an example of this might be getting this feedback that homosexuality is a sin, right? Well, who says that, right? Does everyone say that? Right? Like, is it a physical law, right? What are we really talking about here? And differentiating between a phrase like that, like this is a sin, which implies that this is a universally held belief that just is, versus my religion has taught me that this is a sin, or I have been socialized into believing, that this is a sin, right? And I think in order for us to really contend with these impacts, we really have to. I think it's really important that we frame it in those terms, right? That it's part of what we've learned and what we've been taught, and not necessarily just a universal truth, even if it feels that way. And then I think from there we can ask ourselves, who else is grappling with these questions? Because chances are, if you're grappling with it, someone else has, right? Whether it's about the intersections of queer identity and being Christian or Baptist, or certain cultures. Like, if you're thinking about it, someone else is thinking about it. And when you can frame things in terms of programming and learned behavior and beliefs, you can ask yourself, like, well, who else has grappled with these things, and what are the conclusions that they have drawn, right? Like, how have they been able to reconcile these things and come to a place of acceptance and peace? So that's really what I would say about that. And like I said, I think the first part is just not taking these things for granted, right? And really seeing them as like social constructions and not, like physical laws of nature.
So what I'm gathering is, definitely find that community, feel who is questioning the same thing as you or believing the same thing as you. Thank you for that. All right. So we can go ahead. What unique challenges do LGBT parents face, and what resources are available to them? So I know Kenya is a parent, but possibly within, just research that you have done, what resources are available to parents in general. So Kenya, we can actually start with you. As a parent, do you face any specific challenges?
Uh, I haven't really faced many. I think I've been really open and honest with my daughter. She's 12. So when she was around 7, as when me and my wife got married, and she's very mature. And so, just being able to have that convert at first, it was, oh, my wife, that's my bestie, that's my best friend, that what she could handle, right? But then I think challenges is just being open and honest, with your child about who you are. And then having to answer questions, like that has been a challenge for me. I would say, having uncomfortable conversations like, so mom, have you always liked women, and what happened with you and my dad, or just things that I or my daughter, very proud of her family and going to school and saying, hey, I have 2 moms. Like, ooh, okay, so she's very like loud and proud about it. But I would say the challenges that I can see that other parents face, just based on my client interaction, is just like grief. you know um that's what I would say. I do kind of talk to my clients about understanding how their parents feel about who they thought their child was. And Dr. Cypher touched on it a little bit, right? So I do recommend that parents also, join support groups. Like for Atlanta, I think it's like PFLAG, and then there are other City of Atlanta resources that I'll drop in the chat as well. But like, let's be real about what we thought our child was going to be. A lot of times when parents get the news, they're like, oh, well, I'm not gonna have no grandchildren, because they're thinking in such a traditional, way about how children are brought into this world. So then they also, I recommend parents having counseling and even grief counseling, because as we know, grief is not just death, right? So grief is a loss, grief is a disappointment, or, something that did not go in the way that you want it to be. So it could be a relationship, it could be a death, it could be expectations. And so parents have to grapple with, okay, this is not what I expected from my child. I thought I had a child that was going to be straight and that was going to marry, if they're a girl, they were going to marry a man, or if they're a man, they're going to marry a woman. And so coming to terms with the expectations that we just put on our children before they can even decide what they want to be, you know. So that's kind of, I think, a common challenge with parents, like just accepting and dealing with their own sadness and disappointment.
For sure, for sure. All right, Hakeem, what would you like to add to this?
I would just say I love that perspective. I did not think of it or connect grief with that. I really appreciate that perspective, because now when that comes up, we will approach it with that lens attached to whatever else we're talking about. I really enjoy that, because the acceptance part, right? Even of self, right? Because we have our own process, right? And I think of acceptance. And so when it comes to parents, there's also that, right? They have their own process of acceptance. We won't tolerate disrespect, right? And so that's where we set boundaries and, things like that. But that's not the actual question. Your question is, what are the unique challenges parents face? I think going back to community, it's different here in Atlanta because there's so many folks who are parents and same sex, same gender loving parents. But in New York, I can easily see how that's a challenge in finding neighbors and community organizations. And it's not as there's not a number that's like, I can go to this organization or I can go to this church, right? Because there are churches here that where you can connect and build and things like that. So I think challenges might be around finding community in a neighborhood or a PTA organization that you can show up and be your most authentic self. Because I think there might be a lot of code switching, there might be a lot of explaining, there might be a lot of that, and so that can get annoying. And so that's probably what we will talk about, is that annoyance or that frustration or feeling unseen or unheard in different spaces as a parent. And so looking at that and really giving space for that, I think, is also important.
Thank you for that. And I'm happy that you figured out, okay, how could I connect this grief? Because when my client comes with me, I'm like, I know exactly what to say. And Kenny, I see the resources. I'm also taking them for myself. So when I send the email, I can add these resources in the email as well. All right. Got that last one. Okay, yeah. Dr. Isaiah, what would you like to add to this question? Because you grew up in New York. You say you're in Chicago now. Do you see, because Hakeem made me think state to state, things can be different. Do you see a difference with parents in different states?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this really brings us back to the like legal and like political aspect of it. What what policies are there in place to protect parents, like LGBT parents, and even within within a city, right? Like cities aren't monoliths, right? So I grew up in New York City, this like big liberal place, but Naisha, I'm sure you can relate to this. Growing up in Jamaica, Queens, like that, there were certain codes around behavior, right? And like what you could do in public spaces. And that was like very sort of heavily policed in a way. So I think it really varies like neighborhood by neighborhood. And I think another thing to point out is that when we're talking about LGBT identities, like we're not talking about those identities in a vacuum, right? So those identities very well may intersect with other forms of oppression, whether it's like class or race or, gender, like things like that. And I think that that is having to exist at all of those different intersections can be really challenging, right? Because people may feel like if you're a LGBT person of color, right, it's like you occupy kind of this middle ground, right, where you're not necessarily welcome or affirmed in these like mainstream queer spaces, but there's also this sometimes what feels like a little bit more of a barrier within certain spaces of color. And so I think that um, having to straddle all of those different worlds, I think is something that yeah, that can be challenging, especially at the family level.
Sure, absolutely. And I'd love to add, if that's okay, being a Black mom, Black queer mom, I have had to speak up for myself. First, when we got our daughter's birth certificate, it said father in my name. And we asked why, and they said, oh, that's just an automatic thing. It happens like that. And I'm like, goodness. So I had to pay extra money to get that changed so she can get her passport. And it was like, wow, why did I have to go that extra step and come out of my pocket? Because birth certificates are not cheap for a document. So that it just, that was the first portion. And then we do have to explain our dynamic with my daughter having two moms. If we feel that we are not comfortable, then I walk out. Like, there was a doctor, they were like, well, who's the mom? No, but who's the real mom? And I was like, you know what, maybe this is not the best time for us to seek your services. And I left. And my wife was like, well, we can find someone. So thankfully we were on the same page. We can find somewhere else, because that just didn't make sense. Who's the real mom? Like, come on now, where are we? But unfortunately it happens. So that's my take on it. I have so much more. I've been a mom for 6 years now. So many things. So this is a fun question. I also think this is gonna be very generic with people across the board, but why is self-care important for members of the LGBT families? And what are some effective self-care practices? I love self-care. I'd love to start off with you, Dr. Isaiah. I know you just shared, but if that's okay, if you can jump in.
Sure. I think self-care is how we retain our resilience, right? It's how we restore ourselves, especially because many of us live in worlds that really drain our resources or take from us or don't recognize us in certain ways. So I think, yeah, it's an important mechanism of resilience. And in terms of self-care practices, I mean, I would recommend, what I recommend to all my clients, right? It's like, try to get enough sleep if possible. I think community, right? Community is such an important part of self-care, right? We often think, self-care is something that has to be it's like an individual practice, or it's like, I'm gonna go off and take a bath or do whatever, read a book. But I think showing up for other people actually can help us to show up for ourselves, right? Like, it's staying connected to other people. We're all therapists, so therapy, if if that is a great form of self-care. Exercising, meditation, things like that. I think really the things that maintain us and whatever helps to make you feel grounded and restored.
100%. And I'm a huge, obviously, proponent of therapy, 100%. And Hakeem, how about for you? What would you say, why is self-care important for members of LGBT families? And I also want to address, family members as well, because they may need to take their healing to another level, because they received news they weren't expecting. How would you say that could help them, self-care in particular?
Yeah, I think the art of self-care is really maintaining balance, finding balance, go searching for balance. And with that, the breakdown I love doing is breaking it down to mind, body, and soul. What do I need to find balance within my mind, within my body, within my soul? And so lately it's getting into nature, connecting with outside, moving your body, like go dancing, right? Go have fun, go play, cook a meal, cook something that you wouldn't normally cook, right? Doing it in the name of this is self-care. I'm taking care of myself. I'm reclaiming my love for myself. I think shifts everything, right? You could do the most mundane thing, but if you do it in the name of this is self-care, this is me reclaiming my love for myself, it shifts your mindset, right? It shifts everything for you. And so I tell people all the time, if you have, because most times it's like, oh, I don't have time, right? That's the thing. So I'm like, oh, if you got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, put a good Shaka Khan song on, dance, sing out loud, do something, right? Do something in the name of reclaiming my love for myself.
So it's simply putting a label on it. And some of you all who were with us in the beginning, we did a 5-minute meditation, giving yourself, as you mentioned, 5 minutes and labeling that. I love that. Thank you. And Kenya, how would you like to add to this question?
Well, of course, I'm always gonna support therapy as a form of self-care because I just think it's so, even if there's nothing just crisis, I think it's just a great tool to have for your own personal self-care. But then, like Hakeem said, just kind of tapping into like that physical, spiritual, psychological self-care. We do kind of often say, oh, I'm gonna get my nails done, hair done, massage, and that's kind of like our go-tos, and I do all that too. But then also, what about like your physical self-care? Like, yeah, you need to exercise, you need to, do mindful eating, mindfulness. It could be meditation, yoga. It could be, I talk to my women and men about you need to go get a checkup. You need to make sure you're getting your annual exams and making sure you're checking like your vitamin D levels. Let's check on that thyroid, make sure that's not, anything. We rule out the medical things too. That's self-care. Let me make sure I'm good. Also boundaries, Hakeem brought up boundaries. Like I might need to have boundaries with myself. That is how am I, my self-talk? Am I being kind to myself? What kind of automatic thoughts am I having? Am I dedicating my first 5 minutes in the morning to just be with myself before I check social media, before I check my bank account, before I check my credit score, all the things like in the morning, like, am I checking on myself? Am I checking in or am I automatically seeing what everybody else is doing? And then am I saying no when I'm exhausted? Am I doing things just out of obligation? Do I feel guilty? Am I being shamed into doing things that I know I'm tired and I'm off, but does that mean that I'm accessible? The people know my schedule, they know I'm off today, but does that mean I want to run errands all day? Or, just because I'm off, does that mean I'm available? Do I know how to ask for help when I'm overwhelmed? I look at all those things as self-care. Like, what can I do to lighten my load? Can I ask for help when I need to? Can I delegate and, just kind of let others pour into me the same way that I pour out to others too?
That line, let others pour into me in the same way, even more, because I'm very confident a lot of us do not take the help that people are willing to give as much as we could. And I'm speaking for myself, but I know other women who are the same. Thank you all so much. This brings so much joy. So our next question, how can LGBT families celebrate diversity and foster a sense of pride and resilience? And this is, of course, if parents have a child who's within the LGBT community, how can they show that pride? Like it's Pride Month, yes, but outside of June, how could they show that pride? Hakeem, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, I would say give honor to it. Really celebrate it. Like take moments to celebrate it. And that could be, again, the most mundane thing. If we name it, this is celebrating you, this is celebrating our diversity, this is celebrating our resilience and taking pride in it. I think, again, it shifts things because now you're focused on the celebration, right? And so I would even say, start your own traditions. We get to be creative as we want to be, right? We don't have to stick to the script as most of us try to do and society tells us to do. You get to do whatever you want, create whatever you want, create new traditions, right? And I think that it will put us in a position to celebrate our diversity.
Thank you. Yes, period. Like just literally do what we want. Bring the joy. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Dr. Isaiah, what thoughts do you have on this question?
Yeah, I think maintaining a connection and reverence for those who have come before us is really important too. Because oftentimes, we're so focused on the here and now, or like what's going on here and now, and acting as if everything that's happening now is completely novel, that we forget that other people have been through similar circumstances and have found ways to thrive, not just survive, but to really thrive and find, joy and meaning. And I think that when we're connected and when we take time to educate ourselves about, that history and um, the resilience of those who have come before us, it helps us to tap into that quality within ourselves.
Thank you for that. Hakeem, you came off mute. Did you want to add anything?
Yes. Thank you for that, because I think I love working with folks moving from resilience to self-efficacy. And a lot of that is understanding our history. A lot of that is connecting to ancestors. A lot of that is incorporating that into our language and into our conversation, because then I get to believe in myself and my ability, right? I think that is taking pride and taking it to the next level where I'm not shaken. I think that interrupts some of the shame or the residue of shame and things like that. So thank you. I just wanted to amplify that.
Thank you all so much. Okay, yeah, and Kenya, what are your thoughts on this?
I love what has already been said, of course, just kind of educating ourselves and educating just on history, and then showing like our children or our teens and young adults examples of successful people in the community. I think representation is so important. Seeing people that have been successful, because we talked a little bit about like religious trauma, and in certain circumstances, people are made to believe that they're doomed, their life is going to be horrible, they can't be successful, and you're not going to be accepted because of your sexuality, and you're never going to be anything worthwhile. And I just think that it's so important to like shut that down, and also just I think for parents and just families in general, the respect, respecting the pronouns. If you okay, if he want to be she, say she, like I, just respect and educate yourself on the pronouns, and help to submerge yourself into our community. Go to the drag shows, go to the gay club, just experience it for yourself before you judge it, because I think a lot of times in families, honestly, people are fixated on the sexual part of the relationship. So they're so like, oh, you're doing this. You don't want to get too, graphic, but I think that's kind of what the main focus is on, instead of focusing on these are two people that genuinely love each other and they care for each other. They have a healthy relationship. A lot of times could be more healthy than some hetero relationships. So, just being open to like being educated and being corrected in love, that's what I think.
Thank you. And I love how you emphasize, take the idea of the sexual portion out of it. Go to an event, just like you would go to when it's Asian Heritage Month, you're exploring another culture. Go to a different event. I love that. I never even thought about it like that, because I personally try to tune people out. That's just another conversation. So this question kind of coincides with our previous question. What role can advocacy and activism play in improving the lives of LGBT families, and how can individuals get involved? So we're talking about our allies. People, the question, well, how can I be an ally? What else could I do? What would you share for them here? And Dr. Isaiah, we can start with you.
Sorry, I got a notification. So I would say that, there are multiple levels for this. One thing that comes up is something that we talked about finding that safe person, right? And that safe person may be your advocate, right? May be the one who, if family members have um, like bully or disrespectful in some way, they can be the person to step in and to say like, hey, I don't like how you're treating this person. And I would appreciate it if you stop because it can be so burdensome, right? To have to um be figuring this out for yourself and then having to defend it, at the same time. Um, and so I think there's like the individual level, and I also think on another level, like local politics really are important, right? Um, and seeing what's going on, like what are the pieces of legislation that are um, being debated, implemented in your community, right? Who are your representatives and how do you make your voice known, right? Whether it's like reaching out to an elected official or donating to a campaign or something like that. I think that that is like so important, right? Because the decisions that are most likely to impact people in the community are not federal decisions. They're like local decisions, right? So just figuring out like what's going on. Um, and I think, that also doesn't have to be um something that a person has to do by themselves. Like I think many LGBT centers will probably have resources for people who want to educate themselves about issues. I know that I think the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, has a whole page, devoted to um, issues around LGBT rights. So yeah, I think it can play an immense role. I mean, just all the just going back to what we were saying before, like all the legal challenges, like these are things that, you know, people can make their opinions known.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And I do have another question I'm going to add here, and then we'll start the Q&A. Actually, I have a bonus question that our panelists don't know about. So after that bonus question, the Q&A will come about. Okay, so I put that in here. Sorry, here we go. All right. Sorry, I was getting confused. I think I copied the wrong question, y'all. Bear with me. I want to make sure I get to everyone. Kenya, I don't think you answered this question yet, right?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's why I typed it in again. Okay, so here we go. You can answer this question. What role can advocacy and activism play in improving the lives of LGBT families? Okay.
Okay. So like Dr. Cypher said, I think like on a macro level, of course, like with legislation and policy for sure. But if I'm thinking like community and just in our day-to-day life, just in your own community, you can advocate for, equal treatment. I would think even like in schools and in the workforce, I think that there should be, required, cultural competence training and how to treat, members of the community and discrimination, things like that. I would love to be a part of something like that to kind of help, organizations have those kind of mandated trainings. And even for like upcoming, medical students and doctors and just that health equity and competency of how to um, address people in the community, like with your experience, you and your wife, and like just knowing what's appropriate and what's not. The appropriate training can help you with that, knowing the pronouns, knowing the family dynamics, so that you're not offensive. Having inclusive, waiting areas in your clinic and, exclusive medical, the EHR where you can have your patients put in their pronouns, just simple things like that, that could be just more inclusive, that we don't often think about, but just to me, just set you apart from other people.
See, I didn't even think about that. And I'm like, because I would feel so loved. Like, thank you so much for letting me put this in. Thank you. And Hakeem, we can end off with you. What role can advocacy and activism play in improving the lives of LGBT families?
Yeah, I would say respect and support, right? And that could look in various ways. So even going back to what Kenya talked about, like go to the drag show, give your dollars to the drag queens, right? So I think that's a part of advocacy because you are celebrating someone's existence. Someone's existence by itself is advocacy, right? And so if I'm in a position to celebrate and to pour into and to donate, then I want to do that because outside of that, what are we doing, right? And even in your space, take up space in your space, right? I have a friend, an Instagram friend, who has a large platform, mental health advocate, and came out as an ally. June 1st was Pride, and I'm an ally, and this is what I do, right? That's taking up space in your space. I think that's important, right? And then he took it a step further and highlighted some LGBTQ plus therapists who are advocates and therapists in the space, right? That is taking up your space, taking up space in your space. So use your platform to promote respect and support.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, thank you. Now this question is a bonus. You can keep it short if you'd like, and then we'll have some Q&A. So Dr. Isaiah, if you could sit down with any LGBT advocate, dead or alive, who would it be?
Yeah, I would say Fired Rustin. Um, you know, yeah, I mean, someone who is so way ahead of his time in so many different ways, and I would love to just pick his brain. Um, so yeah, that would be my pick. And I also saw part of the movie recently, so I think he's very much on my mind. And I love Home Alone, but I
Exactly.
know that's not the same.
No, I love it. Thank you for that. And Kenya, how about for you? Who would you choose? Who's the dinner conversation date? I love it.
That is so hard, but I just have to say what's just on my mind right now, and because I'm a millennial and this is like a pop-up question. So off the top of my head, for me, I would say I'm feeling Lena Way, because of, she is doing a lot within the community, putting our stories on, TV and sharing her platform and just being like someone that we can look to and look up to, like the younger generation, as, a masculine presenting female in film and TV, someone that probably was counted out or, judged and probably not taken seriously in certain spaces and celebrated. And now she has carved out her own lane and just made opportunities and continue to put other queer people in position to be successful. So I really truly admire that. And I would love to meet her and sit down and just, chop it up.
Yes, I love that. I'd love to be the fly on the wall and hear that conversation. Actually, I could be at the next table, so we could do that. I love that. Now, Keem, how about for you? Who would you sit down with?
I would have to say James Baldwin.
Hey.
Outside of it just being a key, I feel like just asking questions about words and, frameworks and theories and thoughts, because I think I'm a big believer that words have the capacity to shift energy, and how he mastered that, right? I would definitely James Baldwin.
Sweet. Thank you for that. All right, so we just have enough time. We have 15 minutes remaining for any questions. Of course, we want to keep it short and just be honest and vulnerable if you choose. If you want to have a generic question, that is up to you as well. So you can raise your hand, come off mute, put it in the chat if you don't feel comfortable saying it yourself. Sometimes people send me a private message and I'll say it on your behalf without saying your name. Anyone has any questions at all? In the meantime, as Kenny was sharing, I was like, who would my person be? It would be Queen Latifah, because I really feel like I haven't had a moment to hear her story. I know her role in Set It Off, my favorite movie. Cleo, that was a character, but I really feel like she got some type of connection to that character. I was like, Queen, like you, please just tell me more. I learned from you in different ways, but it was kind of through the lines, through social media, things like that. So I'm just throwing that out there.
And so it wasn't even through social media yet, right? But we heard these stories, like aunties talking at the table when it came to Queen Latifah.
And then she just popped up with a wife. That's what it was. And Terry has a comment. Yeah, do you want to come off mute or you want to type it? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. This was just everything. Just, I got so much information. I feel like I have so many tools now, and I just wanted to thank you just for for holding this space. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And for everything you were sharing, I'm so happy that your children have you in their lives, because a lot of people don't have support. So I'm very happy. And thank you for being here. All right. Anyone else? Any remarks? Going once. All right. Does any of our guests have any questions? Anything you want to share?
I just want to say thanks for putting this together. It was great to share and also to learn, and yeah, just really really appreciative.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us your time. So yeah, it looks like we can end now. I'll send out the recording to everyone. And I'm really, really grateful. And one thing I want to say, just like we say as Black people, don't only celebrate us during Black History Month, please celebrate the LGBT community 365, because we're all here, we're always queer. Okay. If anyone has any questions, you can definitely email me. You have my email. I've been sending out the emails, and I'm thankful for all of us. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Anthony. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.